Spotlight is a production of CTNY, the Catholic Television Network of Youngstown. It seeks to spotlight people, places, and events from around the Diocese of Youngstown that promote the new gospel of joy called for by Pope Francis. Your program host is Father James Corda.
Hello and welcome to Spotlight. I'm Father Jim Corda. Joining me now is President Richard Jusome from Walsh University. It's such a pleasure to have you on the show today.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here as well.
We want to talk in our first part of the show about the beginnings of Walsh College. We know it started in the 1960s.
Correct.
And give us a little background and a little history of the beginnings of the university.
Oh, sure. Walsh was founded by the Brothers of Christian Instruction, a religious order of teaching brothers who themselves were founded in Brittany in France, eventually migrated to Canada, and came down the east coast of the United States. And at one time in southern Maine, they had a tiny little college named after their founder, called Lemonade College. About 60 students. They were preparing young men to staff their schools in New England. Well, as circumstances would dictate, one of the brothers, Brother Robert Francoeur, had gone to study at Notre Dame to get his doctorate in philosophy. And a fellow student of his there was a man named James Malone, who was also studying there. And they talked and became friends. And Father Malone said, if you guys ever want to move, you ought to consider our diocese. Well, when the brothers were extending themselves west, they had a high school in Detroit, and they thought they'd move this way. They contacted Father Malone, who at that time put them in touch with Bishop Emmett Walsh. They came to visit Bishop Walsh in 1958, and he said to them, I would certainly welcome you to our diocese. However, there is one condition. And the condition is that you will staff a new high school that I'm building. And that was St. Thomas Aquinas High School in Louisville. So in 1960, Walsh opened its doors on November 17th to 67 young men. It was going to be men only, commuter only. They had never taught women, didn't feel qualified, and they had run some boarding schools on the East Coast and knew that was 24 hours a day. They thought, would this be wonderful? Well, part of the problem was they only had two majors when they started out. One was business, the other was education. How are you going to have a school of education without women? Very quickly they figured it out, and women at first as commuters, and then later on even in the residence halls became part of the campus. So it started in a very simple way. Bishop Walsh had sold some land in Stark County and used the money so that the founding brothers could build a home for themselves on the campus. It was an alfalfa farm, basically. And they didn't have any money. They didn't have any plan. They had no employees. But one of the founding brothers remembers saying in French, I think I can see un petit collège here. And here we are, 54 years later, 3,000 students, 6 campuses, graduate programs, all starting because they had tremendous faith. And the motto was, God gives the increase. We will plant the seeds, let God worry about the harvest. And so it's a very humble story with humble beginnings on a farm, wondering if somehow they could make Jesus known in Ohio.
Well, we know that Walsh has grown exponentially over the years, and I remember when it went from college to university, that took place in the 1990s.
Early 90s. Right.
And so that changed the climate of the place as well. Let's go back to the charism of the Christian Brothers. What specifically was their charism that's carried on today?
Okay, that's a great question. Really 3 parts to the charism, which essentially got codified as the mission of the university. Part 1 was to educate working class families and their children. Not to be the most prestigious or the most elite or the most expensive. To this day, 46% of our undergraduates are the first individuals in their families ever to go to college. They're smart, but they don't come out of that. So when parents visit the campus with high school children, everybody's intimidated. The young person, as well as the parents who aren't familiar with the jargon of academia. If we can get people to come on campus, we find that they can belong there. About 40% of them will actually enroll if they visit. But along with that, when you're talking working class families, 30% of our families are from at or below the poverty level. And so last year we had a $72 million budget for the university. We gave back $23 million in financial aid. These are poor families. We do it in a faith-based environment, in the Catholic intellectual tradition, but only about 58% of our students are Catholic. And so we have many different faiths represented there when you consider there are students from 31 different countries. So there's an inevitability of that. But everyone invited to everything, and everyone welcome at everything, but nobody keeping score. We let God keep score. And the third part was preparing students for professions, for careers, for jobs, for graduate school, but also to be leaders in service to others. Last year, our students performed over 32,000 hours of volunteer service. So that's the charism. Working class families, Catholic, faith-based service to others.
We're down to 2 minutes of our first segment together. Why is service and mission such an important part of not just the university, but of young people's lives today?
It's amazing. This is the largest generation ever in the history of our country. We call them the millennials. They're very trusting. They trust teachers, they trust their parents, but they are magnificent if someone can articulate a need with some degree of passion and let them realize what a difference they can make. They're up at 7:30 on a cold Saturday morning building a habitat house. On spring break, not everybody's heading to the beach. Vans full are heading to Appalachia. It's helping out in New Orleans. It's getting to Tanzania and working in a hospital, going to Uganda in an HIV orphanage. Young people are amazing.
We are down to 1 minute, so I'm just going to ask you this one question. How important is spirituality in the life of the students?
They would like you using that word spirituality. When you poll students and ask them what particular religion or organized faith they're part of, the fastest growing category is none of the above. However, they are Catholic. They do quietly show up at a late night Sunday night mass in large numbers, but they really feel as if they're spiritual beings. They don't deny that. When asked the question, why don't you attend regular church services? Number one answer, my parents never took us.
We're going to talk more about that in a moment. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
We are in our 7th year, Cristo Rey Jesuit High School. It arose from the desire of the Jesuits in the Chicago province to serve the Hispanic community here in Chicago. One of the things that's unique about this school is that our kids work 5 days a month at offices in downtown Chicago to pay for their education. That idea originated here. We got telephone calls the first day from the companies thanking us for sending us those kids to their companies. The companies feel good about themselves. 95% of our kids are the first ones in their families to finish high school, and 87% of our graduates are in college right now. This project attracts wonderful, wonderful, enthusiastic, idealistic people. They have to have the desire to kind of reach for the stars. No one believed that it would be as successful as it is. Well, it's obviously caught on, and we're very, very excited about it.
Welcome back to our show. We're talking with President Jusome of Walsh University. Before we took a break, we talked about young people and spirituality, and we began to talk about or think about religion. When do they come to a point, in your experience, where they feel a need to be part of the church, whatever that is?
I think that's important. they want to be part of something. They are joiners. The very way they dress, the logo shirts, the tattoos, those are all signs of someone who wants to belong to something and be identified. When they first come onto the campus, very often they'll declare themselves not having any particular religious persuasion. That doesn't mean they're not at Mass. It doesn't mean on Ash Wednesday the chapel's not full. The busiest day of the year on campus in the chapel is Ash Wednesday. Hundreds and hundreds of students walking around the campus with sometimes very large ashen crosses on their foreheads and not ashamed of it at all. But to the question, are you a Catholic, are you a Baptist, are you this or that, they will often respond, none of the above. Amazingly, when they or their peers are in any kind of crisis, they inevitably think of prayer, of approaching priests or campus ministers and so on. And as they're moving on and they're starting to leave the campus and preparing for marriage and thinking about children and so on, they quickly discover the parish. We deliberately do not do baptisms on campus because we want them associated with a parish to be part of a community because they do very well in community and they like that. So different ones come to it at different points. But for a certain percentage, first we have rejection, then we sort of go along, and then we get very active. And when you take the combination of spirituality, which is very important to them, and the service component that they've engaged in, that really becomes the core of any parish anyway, worship and service. So it works out very well.
Exactly. Let's now focus on the academic community at Walsh. You've expanded greatly over the years the offerings that you provide to the many students that you educate. Give us a taste of some of the academics that are available.
Okay. Well, I must say that from the very beginning, part of the founding charism was to develop programs that would be service professions. So we have a large education department, the #1 nursing school in the state in terms of licensure. We've developed physical therapy. You can actually get a clinical doctorate in physical therapy. You can get a doctorate in nursing. We have a very large program in counseling, school counseling and general counseling. And we actually have the Father Hurtner clinic on campus that serves the community. Now we're adding occupational therapy, exercise science. So when you put the pieces together, nursing, exercise science, occupational therapy, physical therapy, we can sort of take you through your life and prepare you for education, special education, and so on. We also have great strength in the sciences. The growth, particularly in chemistry and biology, has been absolutely remarkable. Environmental science being one of them, but a good number of our students go on to medical school, pharmacy, veterinary school, and many of them go on and get their doctorates in research areas in those subjects. So there's been a lot of growth, and we've been trying to be sensitive to our area, to Northeast Ohio. That's where the jobs are. So now we're looking at engineering because of everything that's happening with the oil industry, for example. 56 different undergraduate majors, 2 doctoral programs, and 7 master's programs now.
Let's talk about some of the numbers that are there. Let's talk about how the university has grown over the years in numbers of students. And let's focus primarily on the campus in North Canton.
Okay.
What's the capacity? Is there room for growth? I know later in the show we're going to talk about some of your satellite programs, but let's focus on what's there right now.
Okay. The campus sits on about 134 acres. And even though there's a road that runs through, there's actually a tunnel underneath. The north side of the campus is recreational. It's green space. It's the Hoover Museum and so on. Whereas the academic and the residence halls are on the south side of the campus. When I got there were about 400 students living on campus. That is not really quite enough to have a vibrant community. So over the years that I've been there, we've grown to 11 residence halls now. and there are about 1,200 students living on campus, and we own 7 homes that are contiguous to the campus as well. So in the last 11 years, we've added 10 buildings, some of them for academic, but there was a deliberate push to add residence halls. And that has enriched us in terms of bringing students from greater distances, growing the international population. But we find that 80% of the incoming freshmen want to live on campus. I found that surprising, but as I talked to other college presidents around Ohio, that's pretty much true, and as high as 90% on some campuses. That makes for a beautiful community interaction, whether it's on the spiritual side, in athletics, or other areas. And of course, then you had to build the academic space as well. And of course, you needed more dining area, more recreational space. So one followed the other. But my first push was to increase the size of the on-campus community. And then things started to fall into place after that.
We've got 2 more minutes in our middle segment now. Let's briefly talk about the community atmosphere that happens there. Because with a group that size, building community would be a wonderful component. How does that happen?
And so in the residence halls, the resident assistants, fellow students, and a group that we call the peacemakers, young people who've had special training live in the residence halls and literally help to make the peace, which often means programming, activities, doing things as a group. We very deliberately try to get them in their living environments to be active communities for activities and such. Campus ministry, wonderful at attracting students. All the academic programs have their own societies and groups and clubs and so on. Students like to be part of something. And so there were probably 70 clubs, not counting a lot of other activities that are sponsored by various academic disciplines.
We're going to talk more about that in a moment. We're going to take a quick break. Please stay with us. We'll be right back.
There is a place where a total stranger will give you their blood. There is a place where someone you never knew will save your child from drowning. A place where people from 7 states away will turn up at your door and give you food and shelter after a flood. There's a place where a person who doesn't look like you, talk like you, or dress like you will stretch out their hand and put it across your shoulders and say, everything is going to be okay. That place is called America, where we look out for each other, and it's up to us to keep it that way. When you help the American Red Cross, you help America.
Welcome back to our show. We're talking about Walsh University. President Jasone, we finished talking about the wonderful community atmosphere that happens at the North Canton campus, but that community has grown over the years to other satellite campuses. Explain that program.
That's correct. Here in Ohio, we have a campus in Medina, one in Akron, and one here in Canfield. Those are mostly adult programs, some in the areas of business and education and in nursing programs as well. But beyond that, we have a campus which really is a residence and space that belonged to the Brothers of Christian Instruction in Castle Gandolfo, really in the shadow of the Pope's summer palace, 22 acres there on a walled estate, and students will do a semester there, an hour of class on campus, and off to the real classroom, which is Rome. That's been absolutely wonderful. So many of our students have never left Ohio. My wife and I have taken them on pilgrimages. We had 15 students on the last pilgrimage. 5 had never been on a plane, and one 19-year-old young woman had never been to an airport in her life. We have a beautiful arrangement in Uganda, in East Africa, in Kisubi. We actually have 120 native Ugandan students studying for a master's degree in educational leadership. really making a difference in that area. And we're also heavily involved in Tanzania. The bishop of the Diocese of Moshi in Tanzania is a Walsh graduate. And so he's invited us there. Our students go there and work in the hospitals during the summer, and in Uganda actually take classes with the native Ugandans and help out in HIV orphanages. And we send our counselors to the northern part of Uganda where they still have refugee camps, and we work with people there as well.
Why is it so important to have these satellite sites, and why are they where they're at? Why is it important to meet people where they're at?
Because we become insular. As Americans, I think it's sort of part of who we are. As Ohioans, it's one step further. We have a lot of students from either urban areas like Cleveland or Youngstown, but a lot of small towns between Canton and Columbus, small rural communities with small high schools, wonderful young people who somehow start thinking that just maybe this is the center of the universe. We think it's critical. You can sit in the classroom and teach them about Euros. But if you put them on the street in Rome and they just got off a plane and they want a slice of pizza, they learn all about Euros very, very quickly in a way that is so simple. And they are wonderful. It's life-changing for them when they start realizing, wow, there are people who do things differently from we. And they get an appreciation for humanity, for the church. When they go around Europe and see what people have sacrificed to build the Catholic Church, a whole new appreciation. It's wonderful to see.
Let's talk now about the alumni of Walsh. I think to any institution, alumni are critical. Why is that, and how is that being celebrated at Walsh?
Okay. Well, after all, the true test of the quality of a university is the quality of the alumni. Now we have about 13,000, so it's becoming a fairly significant force. 50 states, 26 countries around the world. So there is a Walsh network out there now, still relatively young. Unfortunately, I would have to count myself as one of the oldest alumni of Walsh. I graduated in 1967. So our alumni in many cases are still actively working, have children at home and so on. But over a period of time, and we're starting to get there, the alumni giving back to the university is what helps us grow. They're a critical component. They're ambassadors for us around the world. They provide internships, mentoring, and guidance for our students. So they're a critical part of our success.
Let's talk briefly in our last few minutes now together of how people can get in touch with you. Let's say that they're interested. You've just begun a new school year. Let's say they want more information about Walsh. What do they do?
Well, with this generation, certainly the traditional college-age students, it's all about social media. I watched my children preparing for college, and every day 3 or 4 more view books and catalogs would come in. They never opened them. They'd just drop them in a bag on the side because I wouldn't let them throw them away. It's all about social media, the homepage, the website. We're at the point now where by the time the freshmen arrive on campus, through social media, they've already met 15 to 20 other students coming in that they don't even know and have never met. It's sort of a whole different approach. Whereas in the outside campuses, where primarily it's adults, the more traditional forms of advertising, the radio, the billboard, the television, are still rather important. But social media is the order of the day. That's changed quite dramatically.
I think we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the faculty. You know, the faculty are very important to the life of any educational institution. How has the faculty been an important part of the mission and community of Walsh, but also how has that changed over the years?
Okay. Well, originally in those founding days, the faculty were brothers, committed religious, a few priests, and a few sisters were on staff. So for them, that was home. And so they created that atmosphere of hospitality and a welcoming spirit. Our faculty are told from the first day on campus that these are students who are not second, third, fourth generation college students. They're going to need assistance. Office hours must be kept. Leadership must be available. And whether it's through media or in person, there's no separate dining room for faculty. We eat together. People know each other by name. When your average class size is 17 or 18, it becomes very personal, and students see faculty as mentors. It's a step beyond the professor. It's the mentor who really get involved in their lives, sometimes long term. When I visit alumni, they don't say, how many buildings? They say, how's Professor such and such? The relationship was created.
President Richard Jusome, just one final comment as we close our show today about Walsh.
Walsh is a hidden pearl, as the Cardinal Newman Society found out. If someone wants an education in a faith-based environment, wants relationships, and wants to move ahead academically and in their personal lives, let not a sticker price deter them. We will help them to achieve that goal and become part of the Walsh University community.
Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
And thank you for being with us. Have a good day, and God be with you.
Spotlight has been a production of CTNY, the Catholic Television Network of Youngstown. Your program host was Father James Corda.
Hi, I'm Mark Quinn. As I grew up on the south side of Chicago, the Dominican Sisters of Springfield not only taught me, but formed me in my Catholic faith. The sisters worked for very, very little. Now as they've gotten older, they have no savings to fall back on. And we benefited from their sacrifice. And I think it's time that we recognize that much of what we are today, we are because of what sisters did for us. It's our turn to help them out in their hour of need. They don't ask for a lot. They embrace the simple life. I owe them so much. That's why I make an annual donation to the Retirement Fund for Religious. Do you remember the religious men and women who shaped your life? Say thank you to them by donating to the Retirement Fund for Religious at your local parish. Join me. Share in the care.
I am Marino.
Yo soy Marino.
Marino, an American Catholic organization of priests and brothers, has been reaching out to those in need for nearly 100 years in 26 countries throughout the world. Missioners, workers, volunteers, supporters, we are all Marino.
I'm Father Mike, and I am Marino.
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 I am Marino.